to my YouTube channel. Kinda if I had a YouTube channel, but this is for THCI's Wines and Spirits course. My name is Adriana and I will be proving you a presentation on beers. So we're gonna start off with my presentation named The World of Beers: History, Producing, Style and Tasting. So we're gonna jump right into the introduction, guys. So I just want to give you guys a brief history on beers. So beers is one of the oldest forms of alcohol. It is over 7,000 years old, and it likely began in the Mesopotamian era with different civilizations such as the Sumer discovered that fermenting grains like barley would produce a slightly alcoholic beverage, and this beverage was very, very popular, so they used it for payments, as stated in the book The Epic of Gilgamesh. It was super important to their civilization and very, very sought after. It also had trace backs to ancient Egypt, as they embraced beer as much as they could on a larger scale than Mesopotamia at that time. So it was a beverage considered safer to drink than water at that point in time in Egypt, and everybody of every class could have drank beers. During the Middle Ages in Europe, brewing became more refined, and especially in the monasteries. So monks improved the brewing technique and introduced hops, which added bitterness and a different flavor profile, helping us with the beer that we know today. Let's get into the ingredients on how to make a beer. So let's get into what ingredients makes a beer. So water, malt, hops and yeast are the 4 ingredients that is needed when we are brewing and creating beers. So water is the main component. This mineral, it has the mineral content and affects the flavor. So we also have malt. It usually is barley, can include wheat, corn, rice, depending on the style of beer that you are looking for. We also have to have the hops. It provides the bitterness, the aroma, and it acts as a preservative. And the yeast is responsible for the fermentation, and it converts sugars into alcohol and CO2. So we just talked about the ingredients and their roles. We are going to trickle into the brewing process. So there are 8 main processes when we're talking about brewing of beers. So we're going to start with the malting stage. This incorporates the grains. It's usually barley, as I stated before, and are soaked in water and allowed to germinate. Then dries in a kiln, and this develops the enzymes needs to convert starches into sugars. We then move on to the mashing process, where the malted grains are crushed and mixed with hot water. This creates a thick paste where enzymes break down and the starches are able to ferment with the sugars, producing a sweet liquid called wort. We go into the lautering stage. The liquid wort is separated from the solid grains, husks. The grains are rinsed, sparged, and extract as much sugar as possible. You know, when you're drinking a beer, you always get a kind of sweet undertone as well as a very bitter and tart flavor, and this is where it comes in. So after the lautering stage, we move on to our 4th process, which is the boiling and the hopping. Remember, I told you we cannot miss the hops when we doing beers and in the brewing process, is because hops contribute the bitterness, as I was talking before, and it balances off that sweetness. It provides the flavor and the aroma and the natural preservatives. So when that so how we get in that hops now is the water is boiled and the hops is added. So hops is a separate thing that is added to the wort. Then we go to the 5th stage, which is just cooling. After boiling, the wort is rapidly cooled. It needs to be rapidly cooled to a temperature suitable for the yeast, because as we know, yeast dies in hot temperatures. It needs to have a certain temperature for the yeast to remain viable and live. The 6th process would be fermentation. That's how we get the alcohol that we all love. Fermentation, the yeast is added, and that is where I would say, as I just said, the magic begins. Through fermentation, yeast converts sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide. That's where we get the little bubbles and everything. This stage could take days or weeks according to the beer style that we are going for. So then the 7th process will be the conditioning. The beer is left to mature, improves the flavor, the clarity, and the carbonation. Some beers are aged longer for a complex flavor, complex taste, and just for that smoother finish on the throat. And lastly, we have 8, which is packaging. The beer has to be filtered sometimes and carbonated if needed, and packaged and bottled and sent out in the cans, sent out in the kegs, and sent out into the pretty packaging that we all know and love today. Of beers. So I'm going to be speaking on 2 types of beers right now, which is the lagers and the ales. Lager is a type of beer brewed at colder temperatures, which would produce a clean, crisp, and refreshing taste. It is usually lighter in color and body, making it smooth and easy to drink, and is often one of the most popular choices for casual drinking or warm weather occasions, But as opposed to its counterpart, the ale, which is brewed at a higher and warmer temperature, resulting in a more fuller and more complex taste on the palate. It has a beautiful flavor profile. It often has a fruity and bold notes and can range from light to dark, but generally tastes more rich and more aromatic than the lager. So we're going to move on to beer productions around the world. China is the leading production of beers. They are leading, and followed by the United States, and we also have Brazil, Germany, Belgium, and Mexico also having a play in the beers. As I stated before, with the lagers and ales, those are 2 types of beers, but we also have some different beer styles and beer categories. So you have the pale ale. It's a light colored beer with balanced malt, mild hop flavor, and usually smooth and easy to drink. So I would recommend this when you're now getting into beers. You don't want something too strong to throw you off and be like, this really better. I don't like the taste of beers. That is how a lot of people are opposed to beers, So if I was introducing you, I'd have introduced you to the pale ale at first. We have IPAs, which means Indian Pale Ale. India Pale Ale is a hoppy beer known for its strong bitterness, citrus, and fruity aromas, as opposed to its pale ale counterpart. This is more strong. It has a lot of hops, and it is meant to be very bitter and very harsh on the palate, but that is where the appeal is. A lot of people love this beer and actually prefer it more than the pale ale. We have stouts and we have porters. It's a darker beer with roasted malt, often tasting of coffee, chocolate, and caramel. So I know that we are all very familiar with our Mackeson Triple X Stout commercial. So that is what we were talking about just now, the dark beers with the roasted malt and the very strong flavors, more coffee, more gourmand, that kind of flavor we're going for when we're talking about stouts. So we're gonna quickly move on to wheat beers. It's brewed with high protein. It's given a cloud-like appearance, very soft, very slight, and it's very slightly fruity. This is really tasty. You get the different notes, the different citrus notes, the different sweet notes. It's very delectable on the palate, and I think this is something that you would enjoy as a beer enthusiast of sorts. We're going to move on to the sour and the Belgian style beers. So Belgian beers are very complex and are kind of considered spicy. So while being sour, they have a very tart, very tangy, very different if I'm looking for better words, type of flavor, and that is because of the special fermentation that they use. This is probably one of the most unique beers that you would see and taste, and if everybody could have a taste of a sour or a Belgian style beer, I recommend it 100%. It may not be everybody's favorite, but it is worth a taste. So moving on quickly, as I said, we have the traditional German lagers. They're very clean, very crisp, and very smooth. It's usually served cold and is always amber in color. It's your typical beer, your typical beer. So we're gonna move on to beer tasting. So when we tasting beers, we need three components. We have to think about the temperature, the appearance, and the aroma of the beer. So for temperature, when we use for beer tasting, it affects the flavor and the aroma we're going for. Lighter beers are best served with cooler temperatures to keep them more refreshing, more crisp. While darker or stronger beers are served slightly warmer to allow more complex flavor to develop. And for you to understand and taste those flavors thoroughly. When we serving beers too cold, it can mute the taste, and too warm can make it seem flat and just unenjoyable. When we talk about appearance of the beers, we also have to include the color, the clarity, the foam, which we also can call the head of the beer. The beers can range from a pale gold to a deep black, and this may be clear, may be cloudy. A good head includes proper carbonation and helps release aroma while adding to the visual appeal. So when you see a pretty beer, with the foam on top, you want to taste that beer. You want to be like, what is this? You smell it before you even taste it. As we talk about smells, we're going to move on to the aroma of the beers. The smell of the beer, you smell the beer before you taste it, as we do with a lot of food, as we do with a lot of drinks. That I feel like that's just a human response to stuff. And so the smell of the beer, it will include the hopsy smell, the malt, the fruit, the spices, the roasted flavors. Swirling around the glass usually helps release those scents into the nostrils and enhances the overall tasting experience. As we know, your sense of smell is connected to the palate, so that usually helps with anything. So when you smell something tasty, it usually adds to your experience. So that goes for drinks as well, and more importantly, beers. So beers go from an ancient popular drink to a cultural, artisanal expression. Beers have evolved into a universe of styles, flavors, and techniques. Its sensory richness, it invites discovery, sharing, and a celebration of diversity. You can share a beer with your friend and just talk about the day. You can pop open a beer and celebrate a birthday. A beer always has a place in every celebration and every part of our life as human beings. And as I said, it's one of the longest made drinks, so that stands for something. I just want to say thank you guys. For listening to my long and lengthy presentation. I hope you do enjoy, and I hope you got a little bit more insight on beers. I hope you can pop up on a cool one too. Bye.